Thank you so much, not only for the introduction, but for such an inspiring speech. That was a very impressive scene setting. I've spent 2 years trying to get rid of this photograph, by the way. And every so often it bounces back into my life. My goodness me. Look, I'm a former public servant, but I'm still a servant of the public. And so I know firsthand what it is to work in government and the role that you play and how important it is. From Whitehall and the origins of the modern civil service, the role of the public servant has, like the role of government, continued to evolve. This government has sought to be at the forefront of that evolution, as reflected in the establishment of the Government Reform Commission in 2006. Remember that? That reforming zeal has continued through the Public Sector Performance Commission, where the focus turned to the way in which public servants across all organisations perform their roles. Whether it's through the South Australian Executive Service, the Public Sector Act, the High Performance Framework, which I was part of the trial for, the pilot many years ago in the Environment Department, or a range of other instruments and initiatives, this government has been keen to keep up with changing expectations. Changing expectations of the public and the changes in service delivery provided by the internet, by social media, and the many myriad ways in which we communicate and interact with the community and each other. We're now continuing this ongoing desire for reform through change at South Australia and the new Office for the Public Sector. Organisations right across the economy, right across the country, right across the globe are feeling the same pressures to be efficient, timely, value for money, competent, responsive. If we retain our sense of urgency, if we retain our sense of what's at stake for the public sector, then I think that we will rise to these challenges. But in our eagerness to adapt to modern demands, what cannot be lost is your impartiality, your capacity to function as public servants. This impartiality is built into your processes, your culture, your people, and your systems. Impartiality is more than a business strategy in the public sector. It's a proud and fundamental tradition. It defines who you are. The reform program must build on that foundation, never displace it. So the reform process must be rigorously managed and led with a clear vision and a transparent strategy. As a public servant, I sought to provide clear and impartial advice, and now as a minister, I rely upon it. With the competing interests of think tanks, industry groups, businesses, NGOs, community groups and individuals, each of them wanting to get the ear of the sector and influence policy development in their favour, that impartial advice is the bedrock of quality decision making. Impartiality allows advice to transcend Labor, Liberal, Family First, Greens. It's about distinguishing oneself in this complex environment of competing interests and maintaining an objectivity and respect for evidence that doesn't block the efficient passage of advice and service. It's an incredibly complex environment in which to operate. Modernising our public service also means adapting to the new platforms of service delivery. We need to constantly renew our focus on innovation. All your agencies will be required to put in place innovation plans, and you'll be responsible for their implementation. These plans will need to cascade into every single division you work in. Innovation doesn't occur solely in the isolated centre of organisations, but at the collaborative margins where organisations and individuals interact. Communities around the world are facing some very tough challenges into the future, and communities are looking to governments not just for solutions to help people understand, but to help people understand the very nature of the problem. What is climate change? How will the closure of automotive industry affect our communities? How will I be affected, my family, my children's family? Complex problems are not easily defined, and without that definition, solutions will continue to evade us. Public servants, as well as elected representatives, don't always know how to articulate the problems, let alone identify the solutions. These are not easy questions to answer, and that means that solutions to these problems become harder still to define. That's a defining feature of our complex modern environment. But we can begin to address this conundrum by addressing first and foremost what it means to be a leader in the public sector and a participant in this complex environment. Fundamentally, these are the expectations outlined by our Premier when he launched the government's economic priorities, namely to lift the standard of professionalism across the public sector, to develop innovative and simpler regulation, and to adopt a can-do attitude with a clear focus on customer outcomes. The reform program has this as its core objective. Fundamentally, as leaders, there are three core areas that we can focus on, and each one is in a state of reform. Our first responsibility is to serve the community, and our ability to discharge that responsibility will determine in large part the success of our work. There are more than 100,000 people employed in the public sector, and the vast majority of them are actively providing services directly to the community in education, healthcare, law and order, business and consumer services, land use and environmental management. We are all contributing to services to the community, and indeed service is our final collective goal. Core public sector values have been developed to make it easier for public sector employees in all agencies to work together through sharing a common culture and a vision, and Raymond articulated not only what those values are, but why they matter so much. A Charter of Service Guarantee is currently being designed by the Office for the Public Sector and will be implemented during the course of this financial year. The Charter will outline the fundamental obligations of all public sector organisations to provide the best possible services for the community. This is a core feature of the government's A Modern Public Service Policy. The Office for the Public Sector has been working with a cross-agency team to scan for best practice because clearly there are many pockets of service excellence. However, when there are pockets of poor service, and we all know that there are some, the reputation of the entire sector suffers as a result. Our intention is for areas that are struggling to learn from those areas that are already performing well. In some instances, this will include a redesign of the end-to-end business process, because all public servants need to understand that regardless of where they work in the process, they are engaged in service to the community. The Charter will aim to reinforce that understanding. You will need to lead people through these changes, which will be both structural and cultural. This speaks in many ways to the fundamental feature of the reform program that has been in place since 2006. We need strong centralised reform officers. We need them to provide leadership and vision and coordination. But centralised officers don't do reform. It's not a delegated task. Agencies reform. Organisations reform, people reform, you reform. The Office for the Public Sector on its own isn't going to reform the public sector. It is resourced to provide leadership, strategic direction, integration of effort among organisations, which is absolutely essential, and direction of the collective reform process. As leaders, you serve the government of the day by implementing the policy agenda. And you'll be aware that the Premier recently announced the vision for the state, South Australia, a place where people and businesses thrive. In the Premier's words, it is about protecting the way of life that we value, but opening the door to new ideas, new opportunities, new people and new businesses. It's about finally shaking off that perception that Adelaide is a place that is boring or conservative or staid. It's about us taking bold actions and seizing opportunities. It's acknowledging that we must try new things, even though some of them won't go to plan. As the Minister for Automotive Transformation and the Minister for Manufacturing and Innovation, as well as the member for Port Adelaide, I'm particularly passionate about minimising the effect of the closure of Holden on our community. About 12,000 South Australians rely directly or only slightly indirectly on the automotive industry for employment. The impact on the national economy will be deeply felt. Government clearly has a role to play in trying to secure the future opportunity for workers in those fields. Let's keep that firmly in front of our minds. Holden has been an iconic business for Australia and a way of life for our northern communities since the middle of the last century. The government is at the front line of response to the closure of Holden and its effect on the workers and businesses that relied on its continued presence for its livelihood. All portfolios are affected, not just those dealing directly with industry. I'm talking about education, health, communities, social inclusion, housing, and so on. I'm also deeply concerned about the threat to our defence industry and our naval shipbuilding capacity in this state due to the many veiled hints, and sometimes not so veiled hints by the Commonwealth Government, that they are looking overseas rather than locally for the next generation of submarines. One of the key policies released by this government before the election was our jobs plan. Our jobs plan is designed to help shape industry development and continue to support growth. There are 6 key elements to that plan, and I'll remind you, we all share this challenge. Every one of us will be affected by the closure of Holden. First of all, support for displaced workers to secure ongoing employment. Second, to support the local communities directly affected by the closure of Holden. Third, to support the transition of automotive supply businesses into new markets, and many will be able to transition, many will close. Fourth, accelerate the transition to an advanced manufacturing sector. That's our future. It's not can we, it's we have to. Fifth, speed up growth in existing businesses. And finally, accelerate significant infrastructure jobs to create jobs during the transition. Through our jobs plan, the government is investing over $60 million in the economic future of the state, and the government is continuing to negotiate with the Commonwealth to ensure that some kind of effective government partnership is in place, and the plan is well underway. Organisations working in isolation cannot achieve these policies as complex as these are. The level of cooperation and partnership required, not just within government but across the economy more broadly, increases the complexity of these issues. Finally, you're responsible for the sustainability of the organisations and the institutions that you inherit. Make no mistake, the future of our democracy is quite literally in your hands. The long-term consequences of the decisions that you make today will affect the performance of governments for years to come. We are asking you now, more than ever, to become experts in performance excellence, in productivity, and in change. The management of the public sector for so long was relegated to the individual performances of agencies. It's now clear that no one organisation can fully realise the policy ambitions of government or adequately service the complex needs of our community. Collaboration and partnerships are vital. Managing complexity will require from you skills and competencies that weren't necessarily required of your predecessors. Leadership development has long been defined by the needs of the organisation. Today, leadership development is defined by the needs of the system. We have an increased emphasis on collaboration, negotiation, partnership brokering, co-design, and so forth. Some of these are old skills, but they were applied at specific levels of the service. Today, all our leaders are expected to be well versed in one or more of these skill sets. The portfolio of the public sector is primarily concerned with how to build these types of skills within our people and how to create the organisations and systems that will sustain them. The primary office for reform continues to be the Office for the Public Sector, and Change at South Australia is the front-facing aspect of that. However, it is not the only aspect, and I'll let Irma talk further on that point. The portfolio of the public sector also includes the Office of the Chief Information Officer. There are 2 primary resources for change: people and information. One cannot operate effectively without the other. Information is the resource of the 21st century. So I'll be overseeing a reform in how we use information, moving from a system of information silos to a system in which information flows more freely within and beyond the sector. As we all know, there is no problem with information. There's so much out there. It's managing it synthesising it and using it wisely to make decisions. If the Office for the Public Sector is focused primarily on the experience of people, I'm looking to the Chief Information Officer's office to transform the way in which we generate and use information. I'm determined that the portfolio of the public sector is one that has a real and positive impact on all other portfolio areas as we continue to work to improve our performance and, as a result, the lives of all South Australians. During the course of this term, I want you to ask yourselves how you can most influence your workplace to comprehensively address the issues affecting South Australia and the world. You can do this first and foremost by addressing the ways in which you work. This is true not just for public servants, but for all people working in all organisations. I firmly believe that the South Australian public sector can be as progressive, modern, efficient and productive as any other in the world. And I know that that's a view shared by the Premier. To arrive there, we need a capable and determined leadership who can embrace this vision and who can lead the way forward. This is your challenge. My parliamentary and ministerial colleagues and I look forward to supporting you in this endeavour. Thank you.